Hey everyone, Mr. the Fanboy here. This is my several reasons why the past eras of WWE or WWF were better than the current WWE today. The WWE today. I'm also gonna later do why the territories WCW WCW were better than WWE, and of course, my next video after this one is why the indies were better, why the indies and the international promotions are better than WWE. Of course, but this is why the past eras are better than WWE. Now, for the most part, while I'd like totally hate WWE, there are time periods of WWE I do like. First off, there was the regional era. There was the regional era. Pretty much anything before Vince McMahon Jr. took over. Well, I don't like any of the McMahons, probably except for Shane. Vincent Kennedy McMahon Sr. I loved his vision of what professional wrestling should be. He didn't like he revolutionized. He, of course, it was always sports entertainment, but he didn't like all this glitz, all this Hollywood glamour garbage and stuff that Vince McMahon would later do when he what's his name. He liked professional wrestling. He didn't like actors like Jon Stewart and the guy from Arrow. I already forgot his name. The guy from the Green Arrow television series. Wrestling on major shows. He didn't like that. It was wrestling. Pretty much all promotions back in the regional days were filmed in front of a small but highly enthusiastic crowd with short television shows which featured nothing but wrestling and of course angles and storylines. And I loved Bruno Sammartino, Bob Backlund. Billy Graham, I was a huge fan of his when I was a teenager. When I was a teenager and learned more about professional wrestling and the history of WWE and professional wrestling in general. But after some of the stuff he's been doing in more recent times, I still respect him as an wrestler and an athlete. But screw Billy Graham. But yeah, when I was younger, I was a huge fan of Bruno Sammartino, Bob Backlund, Killer Kowalski, one of the best monster heels, one of the most legendary monster heels, Killer Kowalski, and Ivan Koloff, who was also pretty badass. Then you also had the late Haystacks Calhoun, one of the first wrestlers to wrestle in overalls. The wrestler in overalls. Like I said, it was awesome, and it was intense and real looking. You also had great feuds like Bruno Sammartino and a young Larry Zbyszko, which was an awesome feud. This feud was so emotional. I actually believed every bit of it. The suspension of belief that wrestling was real. There were certain wrestlers who made you believe it was real. Who made you believe who made you believe it was real. It was intense and no steroids either. No steroids either. Bruno Sammartino. I watched the sexual. I watched. Well, there were lots. I watched the steroid and sexual harassment trials here on YouTube. I think it was a guy who owns a talk show named Donald, something like that. Well, anyway, Bruno Sammartino, when he said the wrestling he left in the '80s, and then the wrestling he came back to, when he came back, Vince McMahon Sr. was dead and Vince McMahon Jr. was now in charge. He said was totally different. There were drugs, there were steroids. Bruno Sammartino testified against Vince McMahon, and for a while, Bruno Sammartino stayed away from Vince McMahon, wanted nothing to do with WWE, up until WWE finally cleaned up their act, which they really haven't done. They've made it look like they have, but they really haven't done. And I'll talk more about that later. But he didn't come back until they cleaned up their act. And I see everything he was talking about. He was talking about. If you watch interviews on here, you can still find him. He buries Hulk Hogan. He buries Bret Hart. He buries the Attitude Era and Vince McMahon and all this crazy and dumb stuff they were doing, man. They were doing. And if you notice, he did for a while. He didn't take part in any WWE Hall of Fame. He didn't take part in any. He didn't take part in the WWE Hall of Fame up until recently. He took part in independent Hall of Fames, independent DVD productions, and stuff like that. And that's what you call it. What's his name? What's his name? What's his name? What's his name? And I still agree. He later changed his mind after Vince. He later changed his mind about Vince after he did so many things. But I still agree with what he said earlier. I still agree with all the stuff he said before he finally accepted Vince's offer into the Hall of Fame and returned to WWE. But like I said, I liked those guys. They were tough guys. No steroids, just good wrestlers and good workers. Good workers. Good workers. Once again, it was that's what I want. What I want in professional wrestling, what I don't get in WWE today. I don't get this in WWE. I get it in professional wrestling, but not WWE. I want realism, athleticism, storytelling, and psychology. That's what I want in wrestling, and I do not get that in WWE. WWE is just a bland wrestling show, which is the other thing I want. I want that feeling of a larger than life, badass wrestling show, and I do not get that from WWE. What is supposed to be the biggest and most largest and most influential company, and I don't get that today. But I got that in the past. Of course, when Vince McMahon took over in the '80s, when I was a kid, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager and went back and watched all that stuff from the '80s, I loved it. Now, I don't like it as much as I did. I don't like it as much as I did when I was a teenager, and now that I'm like older, yeah, that kind of sucks. I can see why people didn't like this, but that was entertaining. Yeah, the wrestling was not as good as it was in the territories, the international promotions, but one thing the wrestlers had. First off, they had characters, good characters. They had characters, gimmicks. Even though some of those gimmicks, I thought were cheesy, and some of those gimmicks I thought were cheesy and corny. But they had characters, they had gimmicks, they had charisma, and in the ring, while obviously fake, fake. Obviously fake. No, yes, I understand wrestling is work. No, you make it look real. But you can't be doing that. You can't do that if you have them traveling. Something they didn't do in the past. You have them travel. You cannot have. That's why I don't like them traveling. Like I keep saying with the steroids, my problems with the steroids and traveling is it affects the product I watch on TV. It affects the wrestler's performance in the ring. When they're wrestling, they are not wrestling a fast-paced, aggressive style. And you can't do that if you're sitting here traveling, going all the world, wrestling every day. Get rid of the. Why am I saying that? They're not doing that. Which is why I don't watch anymore. Get rid of the road schedule. Don't tone it down. Don't lessen the dates. Get rid of it. No reason it should be around. You have other companies like WCW for when they were here, and other companies like MMA, companies like the UFC and MMA that don't work guys, and they still draw good money and do good business. Once again, I told you the road schedule is an idea that benefits Vince McMahon and only Vince McMahon. Does not benefit professional wrestling in the least. But I'll get to that later. But yeah, so obviously favor. One thing they had the psychology. They had the psychology and storytelling. A lot of these moves weren't good. It was how they hit the moves. They were great workers. Hulk Hogan, when he's doing his Hulkamania stuff, I still get hype. Ultimate Warrior, when I see him, which I despise Jim Hewing, the late Jim Hewing. But the Ultimate Warrior, man. The Ultimate Warrior was an awesome character. I despise Jim Hewing, the human being, and I despise I despise the wrestler. I thought he sucked. I thought he sucked. I much prefer as an adult. When I was a kid, I loved both of them. But as an adult, I loved his as an adult, I loved his copycat, Renegade Rick Williams, the late Renegade Rick Williams from WCW. He was a much better wrestler. He was a much better wrestler and was just much more exciting to watch. But when Ultimate Warrior does the what you call it, when he shakes the ropes, and flies across the ring, man. Flies across the ring, man. Awesome. They had the charisma, Macho Man. Macho Man. One thing I love about Macho Man, him and Ricky Steamboat at WrestleMania 3, in an era where every match was over the top comic book like, over the top cartoonish and comic book like, you had Ricky Steamboat and Macho Man have a match, they had a competitive looking realistic match with scientific wrestling, mixed with the psychology and storytelling and all the stuff associated with every other wrestler. Macho Man was a top guy doing that. Wrestlers who did what I just said were had to be buried in the mid card. All the real wrestlers and real tough guys like Bad News, Allen, Dynamite Kid, Bret Hart, Lord Steven Regal, not William Regal from WWE. There was a wrestler in the territories in the 80s who named Lord Steven, Mr. Electricity, Lord Steven Regal. All of these guys had to be buried in the mid card. Same with Barry Windham, who left WWE criticizing the crappy rock and wrestling era for being different than the wrestling era. And speaking of being different, remember I said the infamous Black Saturday, where Vince McMahon. And then it pisses me off because on the WCW DVD, he's talking about politics. This guy had the nerve to buy up TBS's Georgia Championship Wrestling's time slot. And this guy, you got these guys down here in the South who are used to seeing Dusty Rhodes, Boz Sawyer, Wildfire, Tommy Rich, Flair, Harley Race, and those type of guys. And this guy comes down here with his cartoonish wrestlers and Hollywood product, and is surprised when the South boos the crap out of him, and he says some crap like, on the Rise and Fall of WCW DVD, he says, I don't understand what politics went into it. There was no politics. No one wanted to see your crappy sports entertainment product. They wanted wrestling, not sports entertainment. Wrestling. Yes, they're both different forms of this. What I just said is both different forms of the same thing, but there's a difference. Wrestling places equal emphasis on athleticism and storytelling, whereas sports entertainment places less emphasis on athleticism and more on the entertainment. Yeah, but you still had you still had awesome feuds during this period, like Macho Man and Hulk Hogan and Andre. I thought Ravishing Rick Rude had a good feud with Jake the Snake, and he also led the Ultimate Warrior to one of his best matches in the company. Same with Macho Man and Warrior in their feud. Then of course, awesome moments. Then of course you had awesome moments. Hulk Hogan body slamming Andre the Giant. One of my favorites was Mr. T and Piper at WrestleMania 2. In a boxing match, and Piper knocks down referee and picks Mr. T up and slams him and turns it into a street fight. And Mr. T rises above the chair. And I hate celebrity involvement, but Mr. T, Lawrence Taylor at WrestleMania 11, Malone and Rodman in WCW, and Kiss on WCW. Playing live on Nitro. Then Kiss, Gene Simmons later giving his gimmick to the late Brian Adams, and Brian Adams later giving the gimmick to preliminary wrestler Dale Torborg, and of course these are examples of celebrity involvement I like. The guy from Green Arrow and Jon Stewart, Flo Rida, MGK, all the people who appeared on the celebrity guest hosts, who appeared on the celebrity guest host crap they were doing back in 2009 and 10. I do not like, and screw WWE for that garbage. But this was some celebrity involvement I like. And speaking of celebrity involvement, and having football players competing at WrestleMania 2 in the Battle Royal, having wrestlers and football players competing in WrestleMania 2. So like I said, awesome moments. Then in the early 90s, which I like a little better. I love the WWE in the 90s, pretty much from 1990 all the way to 97 or 98. I thought that from 90 to 98, I thought that was WWE. WWE at its best in terms of set design, storytelling, and professional wrestling for that company. For professional wrestling for WWE. Not as good as professional wrestling in the territories or their rival promotions. Then of course, into the new generation era. One of the things I love about the 90s is when guys like Bret Hart and Mr. Perfect came. These guys show you could have scientific wrestling with a story in the main event, instead of constantly burying them in the mid card. These guys made WWE more grittier. It was hokey. It was in the 80s. It was hokey, and what's his name? And in the 90s, the people were growing up and getting sick of that. The people you still had, you alienated the other people with all that racist crap you did. All that racist crap you did. I may have not have understood most of that stuff I was seeing when I was a kid, but I'm pretty sure some other people there, they were offended by it. I can see why people, besides the fact it's commonly known that wrestling was work, I can see why people never really respected WWE, never really accepted or truly respected or accepted WWE, because it's trash. It's an embarrassment to mankind. But at least back then it was like cool. It was like awesome. But I can see why they never respected it. They never truly respected it. Then of course you got the 90s. So going back, you alienated the original fans with that, and of course the admitting that wrestling was work. Yeah, people knew it, but people knew it, but people still didn't know. Now that you just said it was work, no matter how good you, and this is the problem they have now. No matter how good you make it, no matter how realistic you make it feel, no matter how good the angle is, it will always come back to the fact that this was set up. So, telling people wrestling, so you alienated the original fans. So all you had were the guys who stuck with it. Those guys who stuck with it, and the kids who were coming in, who are now adults now. Most of the independent wrestlers I know hated the Attitude Era, and like Bret Hart and Shawn. Even Dean Ambrose, I heard I didn't hear the promo, but I heard someone else speaking where Dean Ambrose called the Attitude Era the most overrated era in professional wrestling because of unfunny homoerotic humor and penis jokes and stuff like that. That's why he never liked that. Most of those guys kind of hated, they liked Austin Rock, but they kind of hated the Attitude Era, and they liked the New Generation era with Bret, Shawn, and those guys. And so yeah, in this era, one thing I love about this era, while still gimmicky like the last era, it was the wrestling was more grittier. Still not as good as territories or rival promotions, but still good. You had larger than life characters, and this time when I love you had larger than life characters of all sides. Like I said, if I was Booker, I would have wrestlers of all shapes and sizes. I would have wrestlers of all shapes and sizes. Not one size dominating what's his name. I'd have wrestlers of all shapes and sizes, like a live action video game is what I want. This was like some kind of comic book. I wanted a live action video game. Video game, something like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter or Street Fighter. This was like a comic book. WWE today is what's his name. Like I said, you had the 80s and 90s, which was like a Saturday morning cartoon and comic book. You had the Attitude Era, which was Crash TV, Jerry Springer, and South Park. Then you had the early 2000s, which this was more the Ruthless Aggression Era, which was pretty much a toned down version of the Attitude Era. Attitude Era, and this resembled MTV. This resembled MTV, and of course you got the PG era, which in my opinion is the worst era of all time. First of all, not only does it not resemble professional wrestling, which is one of my problems I have with WWE, it was never been professional wrestling. They always have eras. There was never a time where it was just professional wrestling. They're the only company in the world that I know to have eras. They have eras. Yeah, they have names of certain eras in WCW, but for most part, it's always been professional wrestling. They don't have names for each of their time periods, even though fans have given them names. But WWE, for each time period, they have eras. They have for the 80s, they have for the 70s. The only time it was professional wrestling, the regional era. Then you had the 80s, the rock and wrestling era, or the golden era as they call it. Then of course you had the new generation era, the in your house era, the new generation era, the attitude era, and of course the ruthless aggression era, and finally the worst era of all time, the PG era. The PG era, and like I said, the PG era. This era, first off, it looks like a Saturday Night Live parody of wrestling. It doesn't look like professional wrestling. It looks like a Saturday Night Live parody of wrestling. It looks like, not only does it look like MTV, it looks like Disney Channel wrestling. It looks like Nickelodeon. It looks like, just a joke. It doesn't look like professional wrestling. You have atrocious set design. And finally, it's every previous era except none of the good stuff from this era. All of the crap and garbage from that era, from those eras, are here. This is mostly the Hogan and Attitude Era with some elements of the New Generation and Ruthless Aggression era, and nothing good for those eras. Everything bad. The crappy storylines, uninteresting storylines, feuds, bland characters with no gimmicks or stupid, lame, terrible gimmicks. Another reason the old WWE was better. You had better characters and better gimmicks. Even some of the cornier ones. You had better characters and better gimmicks. That was another reason the previous eras were better. Now wrestlers have no gimmicks. They have no gimmicks or no good gimmicks. They have awful promos. Awful promos, no good promos, and some of the worst professional wrestling I've seen. I was trying to watch Survivor Series 2015, and during Dean Ambrose's match, and Dean Ambrose, he's had a lot of stink. He's had a lot of garbage matches. He's had a lot of garbage matches in WWE, and Dean Ambrose, and I think it was Dean Ambrose and Tyler Breeze. I don't remember. It was so bad, I don't remember, but the match was so awful. I tuned out. It was slow. It was fake. It was slow. Obviously fake. Make it look real. It was slow. It was fake, and no psychology. The people were hot for Ambrose, but really no psychology, and it was just boring. And this is WWE. This is a problem I have in WWE. This is not TNA. This is not TNA, the Indies, Japanese wrestling, or the international promotions. This is WWE. This is a WWE problem. So do not come here. No one better come here with some, oh, I'm sorry to break it to you, but every wrestling is like that. No, WWE is like this. This is a problem only with WWE. That's why in my last WWE rant, I disagree with Russo when he said the wrestling industry sucks. No, just the WWE. Just the WWE sucks. Um, um, so, so, um, that's why, that's why, that's why, what's his name? That's why, so that this is why the previous eras of, wrestling were, wrestling was better. But then going back to better feuds. So like I said, you have better feuds, better storylines, better characters, better wrestling, and all. And now you get none of that. WWE is like garbage. WWE is like garbage. Yes, every wrestler in WWE, in my opinion, if you're a wrestler and you wrestle for WWE currently, while I respect these guys as wrestlers, in WWE, you automatically suck to me. A lot of these guys are good in the independents and anywhere else they've been prior to becoming prior to coming to WWE, but in WWE they suck. They suck. Some of it is their fault. Most of it is Vince McMahon and Booker's fault. The old product. I'm excited to watch matches and stuff from the old product. And I've been watching, and that's still exciting to watch despite my problems with WWE. This product I don't care about. This product sucks. This product sucks. And they can get 11.7 ratings. I still wouldn't care. Yeah, I'm gonna mock the fact they have low ratings. They had the lowest rating ever, one of the lowest ratings ever last time. I'm gonna mock that, but I don't care. If they were to get 11 point something rate, 11.9 ratings, I still would not be watching WWE, and I haven't. I felt much better not watching it. You talk about a company that did so much over the years, even when they were good, they like pissed me off. Come to think of it, hell, the steroid trials that I was watching were better than WWE today. Like I said, this was my several reason the previous eras of WWE were better than today's WWE.